Good evening. My name is Jennifer Wilkes, and I direct the John L. Warfield Center for African and African American Studies, the programming arm of UT Austin's Black Studies Collective. It's my pleasure to welcome you to a reading and book signing with Percival Everett. Before continuing, I ask that we remember the struggles and legacies of Native American, Tejano, Black, Asian, and other peoples who have created this space within the context of ongoing dispossession and cultural violence. Many hands have made this event possible. I'm deeply grateful to Warfield Center Senior Program Coordinator, Ana Molina Amaya, the entire Black Studies Collective, the Hogg Auditorium staff, and our tireless volunteers for their labor. I'm also grateful to our event partners, the Harry Ransom Center, especially Dr. Stephen Ennis, Director, Dr. Erica Noon-Kinius, Associate Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs, and Grace Hornfisher, Events Operations Manager. UT's Humanities Institute, led by Dr. Samantha Pinto, and the Texas Book Festival, including Chief Executive Officer Marianne de Leon, Chief Operations Officer Dalia Azim, and Communications and Public Relations Coordinator Jose Rodriguez. Finally, it's always a pleasure to work with Katrina and Eric Brooks, whose Black Pearl Books is a vital community resource. Thank you all. Okay, what follows is going to be a standard introduction until it's not. Please bear with me when things seem to go sideways, and they will, because the anecdote in question is both true and relevant. Percival Everett is a distinguished professor of English at the University of Southern California. His most recent books include Dr. No, finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction, and winner of the PEN Stein Book Award, The Trees, finalist for the Booker Prize and the PEN Faulkner Award for Fiction, Telephone, finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, So Much Blue, Erasure, and I Am Not Sidney Poitier. He has received the National Book Critics Circle Ivan Sandrof Life Achievement Award and the Windham Campbell Prize from Yale University. American Fiction, the feature film based on his novel Erasure, was released in 2023 and was awarded the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, the writer Danzy Senna, and their children. James, Everett's most recent novel, is a literary tour de force. It has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize, longlisted for the National Book Award in Fiction, and named a finalist for the Kirkus Prize. As a scholar of American literature, I was thrilled to read Everett's reimagining of Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from Jen's perspective. Before I could contemplate writing about or teaching James, however, my unconscious stepped in. In brief, I dreamed that my niece and I were floating down the Mississippi River in my compact sedan. I told you things were going to go sideways. We were coasting gently, enjoying the fresh air and open water, until it occurred to me that I didn't have a plan for docking safely. And how does one even dock a car in the first place? As I was wrestling with what to do next, the waves that had been lapping over the open driver's side window began pouring into the car. I woke with a start before disaster could strike. When I contacted my brother the next morning, he shared my suspicion about what had caused the dream. You see, I am a sixth-generation Missourian. My maternal family hails from the same corners of the state as Mark Twain. My 3 times great-grandfather Hiram served in the Union Army's Colored Infantry after gaining his freedom. In the late 1800s, his son, my great-great-grandfather William, was the minister of Broadway Methodist Episcopal Church in Hannibal, the town which Twain recast as St. Petersburg in Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. And William's daughter, Susie, was my beloved great-grandmother, whose middle name I bear. To give Jim voice, then, to rechristen him as James, as Everett has done with his groundbreaking novel, is not only to reimagine as fully human the adult man formerly rendered as a young boy's sidekick, nor is it simply to subvert the fantasy of uncomplicated relationships between enslaver and enslaved. It is also to foreground a world in which African Americans looked beyond the limits of enslavement to imagine new stories for themselves and for their descendants. Such is the work of Percival Everett. His fiction prompts you to reconsider what you thought you knew. It makes you laugh, sometimes gleefully, sometimes uncomfortably. And it invites you to revel in and marvel at the power of language. If you've come to his work through Erasure or James, you must keep reading. Colleagues at Austin Community College and the journal Callaloo had the foresight to bring Everett to Austin long before this year. This evening, I'm delighted to host him at last at UT. Please join me in welcoming Percival Everett.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a great introduction. I can die now. It's nice to be in Austin again. I get the feeling that I'm invited here just so you can keep up that motto, keep Austin weird. I wrote this novel not as a corrective to Mark Twain. I've always been an admirer of Twain's. Early on, reading Life on the Mississippi and Roughing It. And much of my humor has been shaped by my reading of Twain, The Mysterious Stranger, Diaries of Adam and Eve. Those works, in fact, I can trace my overdeveloped and maybe pathological sense of irony and my sense of humor to four influences: my father, a shameless punster, Mark Twain, Groucho Marx, and Bullwinkle the Moose. As I was telling Jennifer backstage, I've yet to make friends with this novel. I've yet to learn to read from it. In fact, I probably shouldn't admit this when I'm standing up here about to read some fiction to you, that I don't really get fiction readings. It's written down, but I will, and again, I mentioned that I didn't mean this as a corrective to Twain. I maybe flatter myself in saying that I see myself in conversation with Twain. I've written the book that Twain was not equipped to write. His novel is from the point of view of an adolescent white boy, and mine is from the point of view of a fully developed black man. We see different things in the world because of those perspectives. So I'm just going to read a couple of sections, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. And I'm sure the questions will be very good, and I say this because my answers won't be. That evening, I sat down with Lizzie and 6 other children in our cabin and gave a language lesson. These were indispensable. Safe movement through the world depended on mastery of language, fluency. The young ones sat on the packed dirt floor, and I was on one of our 2 homemade stools. The hole in the roof pulled the smoke from the fire that burned in the middle of the shack. Papa, why do we have to learn this? Well, white folks expect us to sound a certain way, and it can only help if we don't disappoint them. I said, the only ones who suffer when they are made to feel inferior is us. Perhaps I should say when they don't feel superior. So let's pause and review some of the basics. Don't make eye contact, a boy said. Right, Virgil. Never speak first, a girl said. That's correct, February. Lizzie looked at the other children and then back at me. Never address any subject directly when talking to another slave, she said. And what do we call that? I asked. Together, they said, signifying. Excellent. They were happy with themselves, and I let that feeling linger. Let's try some situational translations, something extreme first. You're walking down the street, and you see Mrs. Holliday's kitchen is on fire. She's standing in her yard, her back to her house, unaware. How do you tell her? Fire, fire, January said. Direct and almost correct, I said. The youngest of them, lean and tall 5-year-old Rachel, said, Lawdy, miss'em, looky there. Perfect, I said. And why is that correct? Lizzie raised her hand. Because we must let the whites be the first to name the trouble. And why is that, I asked. February said, because they need to know everything, because they need to name everything. Good. You are all really sharp today. And let's imagine now that it's a grease fire. She's left bacon unattended on the stove. Mrs. Holliday is about to throw water on it. What do you say, Rachel? Rachel paused. Missums, that water's gonna make it worse. Of course, that's true, but what's the problem with that? Virgil said, you're telling her she's doing the wrong thing. I nodded. So what should you say? Lizzie looked at the ceiling and spoke while thinking it through. Would you like me to get some sand? Correct approach, but you didn't translate it. She nodded. Oh, Lord, Missums, ma'am, you want for me to get some sand. Good. Get some is hard to say. This from Glory, the oldest child, the S's. That's true, I said, and it's okay to trip over it. In fact, it's good. You want for me to get some sand, Missum Holiday. What if they don't understand, Lizzie asked. Well, that's okay. Let them work to understand you. Mumble sometimes so that they have the satisfaction of telling you not to mumble. They enjoy the correction and thinking you're stupid. Remember, the more they choose to not want to listen, the more we can say around them. Why did God set it up like this, Rachel asked, with them as masters and us as slaves? There is no God, child. There's religion, but there's no God of theirs. Their religion tells us that we will get our reward in the end. However, it apparently doesn't say anything about their punishment. But when we're around them, we believe in God. Oh, Lordy, Lord, we be believing. Religion is just a controlling tool they employ and adhere to when convenient. There must be something, Virgil said. I'm sorry, Virgil. You might be right. There might be some higher power children, but it's not their white God. However, the more you talk about God and Jesus and heaven and hell, the better they feel. The children said together, and the better they feel, the safer we are. February, translate that. The more better they feels, the more safer we be. Nice. James finds a pencil, or it's procured for him by another enslaved man. And the first words that he writes are, my name is James. I wish I could tell you my story with a sense of history as much as industry. I was sold when I was born and then sold again. My mother's mother was from someplace on the continent of Africa. I had been told, or perhaps simply assumed. I cannot claim to any knowledge of that world or those people, whether my people were kings or beggars. I admire those who, at 5 years of age, like Venture Smith, can remember the clans of their ancestors, their names, and the movements of their families through the wrinkles, trenches, and chasms of the slave trade. I can tell you that I am a man who is cognizant of his world, a man who has a family, who loves a family, who has been torn from his family, a man who can read and write, a man who will not let his story be self-related, but self-written. With my pencil, I wrote myself into being. I wrote myself to here. James is taken over, more or less, commandeered to pay off a debt from two men who claimed to own him by the owner of a livery stable. And while he is singing, while working, Daniel Decatur Emmett, the supposed composer of the song Dixieland, the song we know as Dixie, which apparently was not actually written by Daniel Decatur Emmett, but by a family called the Snowdens, as I've just learned, buys Jim for $200 to be the new tenor in his traveling group of minstrels. And this is where I'll take up. The Virginia minstrels had set up camp just outside town. The tents were pitched, and a fire remained alive when we returned. A short man offered me a tin cup of brown liquid. I had never tasted but only smelled coffee. I nodded and took it. These white men scared me. They scared me because they weren't invested in my being afraid of them. "How would you like that coffee?" the man tended the fire asked. "Sure am good, ain't it?" I nodded. "Everybody, Jim likes our coffee," the man called to the others. Then only to me he said softly, "Jimbo done tried it and likes it." I cocked my head like a dog hearing him. It would have been easy enough to understand him as mocking me, but somehow he sounded more like he was practicing, or even trying to make me feel comfortable, which was at once evidence of some sort of kindness and terribly offensive. Not to mention that he, though loquacious, was hardly fluent. "Show is good," I said. The man offered a wide smile. "The name is Cassidy. I play the trombone." "What be a trombone?" I asked. "It be a horn. I'll show it to you later." "Thanks for the coffee, Mr. Cassidy." Just Cassidy. Emmett walked over to me, stepped back from the fire. It's hot enough out here without standing next to that thing," he said. "What y'all want me to do, sir?" I asked, maybe laying it on a bit thick. But I was confused about the situation. I was about to be more confused. "I want you to sing," Emmett said. "When the time comes, sing." "Just sing?" "Yes, that's why I hired you." "Hired me?" Emmett looked at me and might have smiled. "I didn't buy you back there. I hired you. I hired me a tenor." "You don't say," I said. "Don't tell anyone around here, but I'm opposed to slavery." "You don't say." "I say," he said. He looked around the camp at the rest of the troop. "All of us are opposed to it." "You mean you be abolitionists?" "I wouldn't go that far. We ain't working to get you free. We're just working, and we need a tenor." A man brought a banjo to Emmett, and the others collected their instrument. Cassidy held a long horn that I believed to be a trombone. "Okay, Jim, are you ready to learn a few songs?" I didn't say anything, but stared at him. He stared back at me and just started singing, a big crazy grin on his face. Old Dan Tucker was a fine old man, washed his face with a frying pan, combed his hair with a wagon wheel, died with a toothache in his heel. "Get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, you's too late to get your supper. Get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper." Right now, you just worry about joining in on the chorus. And that's, "Get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper." You got it? I nodded. They started again, and I sang with them. I enjoyed the sound of the band, the horns, the banjo, the guitar, the single drum. Emmett started on another song. "When I was young, I used to wait on my massa and give him his plate, and pass the bottle when he got dry, and brush away the bluetail fly." Now this is the chorus. "Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. My massa's gone away." When he go riding in the afternoon, I follow behind him with a hickory broom, the pony being rather shy when bit by the blue-tail fly. Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care. Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care. Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care. My master's gone away. That's a good one, don't you think? Sure enough, I said. I was still processing the situation. I quite frankly didn't believe him when he told me that I wasn't a slave, having just watched him pay money for me. In fact, he had in his possession a bill of sale, which no doubt described me as a slave of light brown complexion, about 6 feet high, having large feet and a scar on his forehead, having been bought from a man named Wiley, not a bill of hire, but a bill of sale. Put this on, the tall man said. He pushed a pile of clothes into my arms. Put it on. I looked at Emmett and he nodded. You can get dressed in that tent, Cassidy said. I was, in no understated way, overwhelmed by their kindness and deferential treatment. I stepped into the tent and dressed as best I could. The woolen trousers made me hot and the fabric caused itching, but worst of all, the rough material raked and clawed at the open wounds on my leg. I put on the white shirt and the vest. I knew that one strap of cloth was called a tie, but I didn't know what to do with it. When I stepped back outside, the men laughed at me. Let me help you there, Cassidy said. He began to push my shirt down into my trousers, but I pulled away from him. He gently let me know that it was all right. He tucked me in all around, and then he redid the buttons of the shirt, smiling at me all the while. And now the vest. You probably find all this hot, but you'll get used to it, sort of. I is hot. You're right, I said. We never buttoned the bottom button on the vest, he said. Why? I don't know. He took the tie and put it around his own neck, put a knot in it, and then slipped it over my head. Emmett came up to us as Cassidy was folding my collar over the tie. Good, not great, but good, certainly good enough. Thank you, I said. Emmett looked down at my feet. The only problem is shoes. We don't have no extra shoes. Our tenor was wearing his when he abandoned us. Bare feet work for the act, a heavy-set man said from the other side of the fire. We just blacked them up like the rest of him. Emmett nodded. Sit still. I don't want to get this in your eyes, the heavy-set man said. His name was Norman. He had large hands and used one of them to tilt my face this way and that. In his other big hand, he held a flat tin. What's that? I asked. You need to put some white around his eyes and mouth first, Cassidy said. I was thinking I'd put the white on after, Norman said. Well, you're the expert. What's that? I asked again. This is boot black, but you have a choice. I can use lamp black or soot or burnt cork. Different smells, all hard as hell to wash off. I don't know, sir. Then I'll just use the boot black. This gonna hurt, I asked. Only if you move and I get it in your eye. Norman looked to see if that Cassidy had wandered away, and you can drop the slave talk. Excuse me, sir? You can drop the sirs and yowzers. How did you know? I asked suspiciously. A slave can spot a slave, Norman said. What? I studied his face. I couldn't see it, but why would a person lie about such a thing? And how could a white person see through me? I thought that perhaps I'd slipped up with my language as I had with Huck. That was a terrifying notion. You didn't slip, he said. I just knows. His accent was perfect. He was bilingual, fluent in a language no white person could master. Do they know? I asked. They do not. What is this whole thing? I asked. Singing? He looked around. This is the new thing. White folks painting themselves up and making fun of us to entertain each other. They sing our songs? I asked. Some. They also write songs that they think we might want to sing. That's strange, but that's not the worst. What then is the worst? I'd better start putting this on you, he said, showing me the tin of polish. I sat still and looked straight ahead. Ready? I nodded. Norman tucked a towel around my collar. Can't get this on your shirt. He smeared the black on my forehead, and then he said, they even do the cakewalk. But that's how we make fun of them, I said. Yes, but they don't get that. It's lost on them. It's never occurred to them that we might find them mockable. Double irony, I said. That is amazing. Can one irony negate another, one cancel out the other? Norman shrugged. I know this stuff feels cold going on, but it won't stay that way long, especially when we're up there singing. Are you a singer? I asked. He put the boot black under my chin. I play the drum. Why? Why are you with them? I want money. I need money. I want to go back to Virginia and buy my wife. Norman said. They have no idea. What kind of idea could they have? You think one of them is going to wake up one morning and say, hey, you look like a Negro? No. He stepped back to examine his work on my face. Will they pay me? I asked. Can't say. Emmett's never done this before. None of these men own slaves, but I don't think they like them. I don't think they think we're like them. I see. Have they ever knowingly had a black person in the band before? I asked, looking about the camp. No, you're the first. To tell the truth, I was surprised, but that tenor up and left. He was a strange one. He got caught up with some man's daughter in the last town, and I guess he got spooked. He was gone in the morning and without a sound. Strange for a tenor. Emmett's coming, I said. I don't know if I need to add any white around his mouth. What do you think, Dan? Norman turned to face Emmett. Looks pretty authentic, Emmett said. Suit fits pretty well. Stand up. I stood. Trousers a little short, Emmett said. Authentic, Norman said. I was hot in the woolen pants, though amused by the fact that they were not frayed below my knees. I didn't understand the complaint that the pants were too high. Pants were pants. They covered my ass. Black on the top of his feet, Emmett said, and maybe just a little white around his eyes. Will do, Norman said. Emmett caught my eyes. Keep singing Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care, Jimmy Crack Corn. Keep singing until you know it. Norman, keep him singing. I will. Everyone got blackened up. It's almost time to head into town. Emmett marched on through the camp like a commander. Help me understand, I said to Norman. I'm to look authentically black, but I need the makeup. Not exactly. You're black, but they won't let you into the auditorium if they know that. So you have to be white under the makeup so that you can look black to the audience. Got it. I reached up and touched my face. What about my language? Don't talk at all. The best thing. And don't rub the makeup. What about the songs? I don't know them. They're simple. You will learn them as they're sung. Believe me, Emmett's songs are music for idiots. My mind was racing. The business about the performance was surreal and foreign, of course, but I couldn't leave alone the thought that Daniel Emmett might be paying me for my singing. I might be able to have the money to buy my wife and daughter. Jim, are you ready? Emmett called to me. I paused, unsure of my diction, whether to speak as myself or as a slave. I made the safe choice. I is, sir. Never had a situation felt so absurd, surreal, and ridiculous. I had spent my life as a slave. There we were, 12 of us, marching down the main street that separated the free side of town from the slave side. 10 white men in blackface, one black man passing for white and painted black, and me, a light brown black man, painted black in such a way as to appear like a white man trying to pass for black. The storefronts, a bank and a store and such, all looked flat and without depth, like I could just kick them over. It occurred to me that there was no telling which side of I was on, free or slave. Then I understood that it really didn't matter. We marched in step, then fell into a cakewalk stagger. Emmett belted out a song line, and the rest of us repeated it. Lottie, Lottie, slap that mule, slap that mule. Lottie, Lottie, slap that mule. Massa keep his corn in a big brown bag. Massa keep his corn in a big brown bag. Massa's chillins run to school, act the fool. Master's chillins run to school. Old Miss chase 'em with her wooden leg. Old Miss chase 'em with her wooden leg. White people came out and lined the streets, smiling and laughing and clapping. I made eye contact with a couple of people in the crowd, and the way they looked at me was differently from any contact I ever had with white people. They were open to me, but what I saw looking into them was hardly impressive. They sought to share this moment of mocking me, mocking darkies, laughing at the poor slaves with joyful spirited clapping and stomping. I looked at one woman who might have been intrigued by me or taken with me, the entertainer. I saw the surface of her, merely the outer shell, and I realized that she was mere surface all the way to her core. The auditorium was a part of the town hall. In fact, it appeared very much like a courtroom. I had been in one once, as I had been sent to deliver lunch to Judge Thatcher. We marched and sang our way onto the stage and belted out songs. As Emmett and Cassidy and Norman had stated, I learned the songs quite quickly, at least enough to sing them on the choruses. It was actually painful to watch those white faces laughing at me, laughing at us, but again, I was fooling them. Come listen, all you gals and boys, eyes from Tuckahoe. I'ma sing you a little song. My name is Jim Crow. We'll about to and about and do just so every time I'm doing about jump, jump, Jim Crow. I won't sing that whole song. By the time we reached the end of that tune, the whole place was jumping, and just like the song had instructed. And then the show was over. All the white people were happy. We had done our job. However, we, the troupe, did not march away, but dispersed into the crowd. And why shouldn't they have? They were white. Norman chose to tend to his drum, and so I was left alone and helpless. I stayed in my chair waiting for him or any other member of the band to realize my predicament and get me out of there. When I looked up to find the face of the woman who might have taken a fancy to me on the street. She had yellow buck teeth and big blue eyes, and never was I more frightened by a creature, human or otherwise, and I was a slave. The woman looked this way and that and leaned in to be heard over the din. What's your name? I searched for help. A man had cornered Norman in a conversation, asking about his drum. Cassidy was far across the room, showing someone just how far a trombone could be extended. Jim, I said. One-word answers, I told myself. I'm Polly, she said. Polly Wally Doodle, I said. We had sung that song. She laughed. Your show is funny. Thanks. Where y'all from? Different places, I said. Lordy, how I'd like to go to different places, see different places, smell different places. This place is ugly and it stinks. Tell me, where all have you been? I was shaking. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes tight, and when I opened them again, she was still there. Your show is quiet. I liked your singing. Thanks, I said. I tried to find Emmett in the crowd. Polly, you should know something. I said, tell me, Jim. I'm married. I have a wife. I whispered. Is she here? Polly asked. No. Have you ever been to Washington, D.C.? She asked. I would just love to go there. I ain't even been to St. Louis. I bet you've been to St. Louis. A large white man with a white beard and a white suit and a white string tie and a disapproving look stepped toward us. You sing right nice, young man, he said, but Polly won't be taken up with no show business folks. Oh, Daddy, Polly said, we were just talking. He was about to tell me about St. Louis. Is that right? Polly's father looked at my face. That is some incredible makeup job. He reached a pudgy hand out and touched my hair. Law, but that sure do feel like nigger hair. Some wig, isn't it? It was Emmett, who came up behind him. The large man actually gave him a start. That wig is very expensive, and I wish you wouldn't touch it, Emmett said. He shared a glance with me. Your wig ain't like his, Polly's father said. We're not a rich troupe. We couldn't afford but one, and it happened to fit Jim perfectly. Tell me, sir, miss, did you enjoy the show? Did I? Polly said. It was just marvelous. A few times I could have sworn all of you were darkies for sure. Her father laughed. Nice show, son, but none of y'all had me going. You can black up all you like, but you can't fool me. I can smell a darky from 50 country yards away. Can't fool me. No, sir, I suppose we couldn't. Hell, son, I can smell a slave from half a mile away. They got kind of a sweet smell, especially the dark ones. Norman finally made it over to me. Come on, Jim, we've got some chores back at camp. I nodded and I ducked my head and started to leave. Jim, Polly said, and I turned to look at her. She pulled her skirts wide and curtsied. I nodded but said nothing. Outside, Norman and I leaned against a wall, panting, sweating, too terrified to look at each other. "I've never been so scared in my whole life," I said. "Me neither. Is Emmett crazy?" "Maybe." "I have to get away from here," I said. "Norman, you can pass, but look at me. It can't keep me made up like this all the time. It doesn't make any sense. My being here, I need to run." It wasn't too long until the rest of the troop came out, led by Emmett. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Jesus Christ," he said. "I thought you were a goner." He laughed and slapped his leg. "What would they have done to you if they had figured out you were actually what they thought you were pretending to be?" Norman looked at my face. "Or what would they have done to all of us?" he said to Emmett. Emmett stopped laughing. "Oh, that's a good point." The troop walked back across the muddy main thoroughfare toward camp. I found a new emotion as we trudged, a couple of new emotions. The woman's father had touched my hair. Slaves didn't have the luxury of anxiety, but at that moment I had felt anxiety. Slaves didn't have the luxury of anger toward a white man, but I had felt anger. The anger was a good, bad feeling. In addition, my feelings about Daniel Emmett were complicated, confused. He had bought me, yes, but reportedly not to own me, though he expected something from me, my voice, he claimed. I wondered what he would do if I tried to leave. In my head, I could hear him shouting, "But I paid $200 for you." A man who refused to own slaves, but was not opposed to others owning slaves, was still a slaver to my thinking. Thank you. And now I'm supposed to answer questions and get ready.
Yes, thank you so much, Percival. So I just want to offer some gentle encouragements for the discussion. We'll have volunteers with microphones. Please wait for the microphone so that everyone can hear you right and everyone to appreciate your contribution. Second, please make sure that your question, right? If you have multiple parts, which I totally get, this is fascinating work, ask the part that you really want answered. And then we're going to alternate between sides of the auditorium. We're going to try to do that to make sure that we spread the discussion love. And then finally, students, I know there are students here. We want to hear from you. So if you have a question, you know that you have interesting things to ask, so please raise your hand and ask a question. And without further ado, I am going to turn the floor over to my colleagues Silvana and Chibukwe, and they are going to provide the microphones for you to ask your questions of Percival Everett. Okay.
And do my answers have to be answers?
That's totally up to you.
There are a couple of hands back there.
Okay. One over here.
Hello, good to be here. My question is, where do these characters originate for you, and do they still live with you?
Well, and this work is a bit of a different experience because the world from which I'm drawing already existed in Twain's novel Huck Finn. Not drawn as I have drawn them, and certainly Jim, was not rendered in any way with any depth. Yeah, no, they don't live. There's not enough room in our house for anyone else, and I come from what I call the Mama Bear School of Art, and that is when I'm finished with a book, I push it away, and if it can eat and survive, that's great. And if it can't, it can do anything it wants, but it cannot come back to the den.
So how did you come up with this concept? Did it hit you all at once? Did you try it as an exercise? How did you approach this?
Well, I wish I could say I wish I had a romantic answer, like I was burning to write this my whole life, and finally it came together. But the truth is, I was playing tennis, and I hit a cross-court backhand that went wildly out of the court. And as I watched the ball sail, I thought, has anyone told the adventures of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's point of view? And at least that served to explain my shot. And so I went home and started researching, and it turned out no one had, and that's how it started.
Hello. So I rarely read literary fiction because it is so oftentimes like self-serious. And I remember reading Hell of a Book by Jason Mott and laughing and being like, oh, this is weird, I'm laughing while reading a book. And so I was wondering like the role that humor plays in your books and how you sort of also make it impactful at the same time.
Well, I learn, it's a lesson I learned from Mark Twain, partly, that humor is a great vehicle for getting to an audience. If I can get someone laughing, then I've relaxed something. And once you have a reader relaxed, then you're free to do other nefarious things to them. And so humor is a great tool. But I view what I do more as an employment of irony, and it happens to be funny than comedy. Because, well, no, actually, I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of comedy is full of social commentary, but my irony has at its root an earnestness, and that binary of which one can't exist without the other. But if it was just ironic and silly, then I could never get to anything deeper.
My name is Temitope Adetoshi. I'm a grad student in the Department of Comparative Literature. Currently, we are one of my classes. We have been reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Let me stand. Huckleberry Finn and James. So while comparing the two, I know James came as like a reimagining of the previous work by Mark Twain, but I also noticed some parts of the part of James that I find troubling. Yeah, he got exposed to education with a stolen pencil, that he got from, fellow slaves, and writing material to me, and also in literature, could symbolize education and a possibility of documentation of history and legacy. But with pencil also comes the possibility of erasure, right? Although in the book we see that he later got an access to pen, like ink, to write. So my question, the trouble I had is the effect of his use of pencil and not ink or pen in accessing education and the contemporary reality of Black people. Since James came as, a voice to the voiceless, we see James is very different from Jim. He's no longer the barbaric and uneducated backward fellow. Why pencil and not pen or ink? Thank you.
Okay. Any writing implement was hard to come by for Jim. A pencil, you don't have to have the ink. And there is a a certain kind of lack of permanence that makes the writing fragile. I like pencil. I don't erase, but I like pencil because of the texture of it. There's a whole history of pencils. I do far more research than anyone needs to do for anything, and I ended up reading histories of pencil making. I could bore you to death. But the idea that that little piece of wood with the graphite in it could cause the harm that it does, it's much easier to hide. There were no ballpoint pens. You had to have a bottle. You had to dip it. It's a messier affair. So it's the basicness of the pencil that I liked. But it could have been a pen. We're just talking about choices.
Hey, Professor Everett, what was the most difficult scene of the book to write for you?
I don't know. I suffer from what we in my house call work amnesia. I do not remember writing this shit. And pretty much when I'm finished with a book, and people remind me of scenes, I love it when this happened, and I just look at them like a deer caught in the headlights, and I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't know. It's usually the conception of something that's hard. I don't start writing until I know what I'm going to do. I'm no good at, some writers, and I envy them, can start and they make it up as they go, and I can't do that. What I did do is I wanted to inhabit Mark Twain's world. I felt I owed a loyalty to that universe, but I did not want to inhabit his text. So to divorce myself from it, to free myself from it, I read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn 15 times in a row. And it was as bad as it sounds. After about 5 times, I was so sick of this novel, but I said to myself 15, so that's what I did. I knew the world, and I hated the novel, and that's what I needed. I will never read this book again. But it did free me and I'm curious, because I have not looked back at it, of how much is alike and how much is different.
Hi, my name is Sergio, and actually it's a related question. As far as on craft, how do you free yourself from the constraints of memory on the page? And this is also going to both history, but also to being in conversation with Mark Twain.
Well, I have a really unpopular answer about craft, and that is, I don't believe in it. I don't understand what that means. Your books that people pick up, setting, I can handle that, and it's got to happen someplace. That setting. Character, it's got to happen to somebody. Dialogue, well, somebody's going to talk to somebody. And there are no shortcuts to doing any of this. And when it gets reduced to craft and not to observation and making art, it gives us the idea that there's some kind of right way to do it, and that's not true. As far as dealing with history, when I say I consider myself in conversation with Twain, I wasn't imagining Twain sitting across the table from me. I was just making a work of art that exists in the world in which his work exists. And being true to history, I actually wasn't. I moved my characters from the from 1850 or 1830s, I can't remember when the novel is set, to 1860, because it was far easier than moving the Civil War. And I needed the Civil War there. So but as far as establishing some kind of verisimilitude in regards to history, yeah, I had to do some research and sort of get into that 19th century frame of mind.
Sorry, that's loud. We saw one example already, and I'm guessing this is going to happen a lot moving forward, of these two books being paired together in classrooms and all kinds of other places. I'm curious about the emotions you feel about being forever yoked to Twain.
Well, that's a poor choice of words. Well, I'm a fan of Twain's work. I've used his novel as a launching pad to enter into a discussion. I don't see any reason to erase him from the experience of this novel. It's clear that you could read this without knowing the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but to put it into historical context, I think you need to be aware of both and familiar with them.
Thank you for a wonderful book. How and why did you decide to make James be the father of Huck?
In the mid-19th century, Pitchfork Ben Tillman, a racist politician from the state of South Carolina, stood in a room at McKissick Library at the University of South Carolina and said to other like-minded racists, I have to preface it with one more thing. South Carolina is the only state in the South that doesn't adopt the one-drop rule. The one-drop rule is the theorem that one drop of blood makes you black. So Tillman said to his colleagues, we can't adopt this rule because if we do, not one of us in here can own land. That this man recognized that in the United States, we are already all mixed. My mother looked white enough that we didn't stop places when we drove anywhere in 1962. So I would never say that this is what Huck was, because Huck's a fictional character. My Huck is. So that's pretty much why. I did it because it's quite possible.
Professor Everett, thank you for doing this. Really amazing talk, really amazing readings. My question to you was about something you said just a while back, that once you're done with the book sort of just goes out, and sometimes you don't even remember that you've written that. In light of that, when you saw American fiction for the first time, what was your first response? And just sort of in continuation with it, have you had like experiences where you've seen movies which either were better than the books or did complete justice to the books?
My first thought was, where's my check? When Corey Jefferson, the director, showed me the film in his living room, the music it wasn't finished yet, and the music hadn't been attached to it. I turned to him and I said, you've done what you were supposed to do. You mined my work and made your own work of art. And that's what we as artists are supposed to do. Even if I hadn't enjoyed it, which I did very much, I would have felt the same way. He wasn't trying to recreate my novel. He was trying to make a work of art that was his. And he did a very nice job.
Thank you for the wonderful book. What spurred your decision to start with the stolen or reclaimed book, the songbook?
I don't remember exactly. I started researching and started thinking about Daniel Decatur Emmett. And it just happened.
Greetings. Thank you for being here. So,
This is always bad when people open the book and about to.
I can close it.
No. It's gonna,
Okay,
that's
so-
even worse if you remember.
No, this is about one of my favorite scenes in the book. This is when James and Hogg, they're like trying to get catfish, and then there's a moment, there's like a big catfish, and James sort of has this moment where he's almost drowning, if I'm not mistaken, and he sees John Locke again, and this is when Locke sort of tells him, look, imagine you're in a state of war, this is what happens to people who are conquered, and then this is when James sort of asks, well, if I'm in a war, don't I have the right to kill my enemy? And then to that, John Locke just says, well, now, twice, which I think it's pretty ambiguous, so I kind of like to see what you think. Do you think that in this way, this would be John Locke sort of agreeing with the idea of, hey, you have the right to rebel, you have the right to fight back? And could it be seen as sort of like a vision of, hey, Western ideals, like figures like John Locke, can eventually be used also as tools or justification for liberation? Just something along those lines.
Yes. I will never say what a book means, because I don't know. I know it's not a hard reach, but imagine I were dead. You wouldn't be able to ask me that question. And that's kind of what I am to the book. The book exists on its own. It's going to make its meaning. More importantly, you're going to make the meaning that's in the book. That's why reading is so subversive. The most subversive thing we can do is no one knows what goes on inside you when you read, which is why fascists want to burn books. So, what you said is good.
On that note, let's give one final round of applause to Percival Everett. So thank you so much to everyone for coming out this evening in person, online. I'm just going to offer some quick notes for the book signing. First, please allow me to walk Percival to the lobby so that he can be in place to sign your books. And then second, if you would like to buy a book from Black Pearl, we're going to have two separate lines, one for signing and one for purchasing, and then you're welcome to move into the signing line after you buy your books. We'll have staff and volunteers to guide you with the lines to help you turn your book to the title page. And again, in the interest of spreading the love, Percival will be signing his name only. He won't be doing any dedications, but again, that will ensure that as many people who want to get their book signed will be able to get their book signed. And then please remember that Percival will be in conversation with writer Roger Reeves tomorrow evening at American Short Fiction's inaugural story sessions. The event will be in Houston-Tillotson University's King Seabrook Chapel, and more information can be found at americanshortfiction.org. Thank you, and take care. Thanks.